on our way to Portal Mountain Development meeting number 91, I suppose, and I think it's part 10 of our series about the.
Axiological conspiracy.
Yeah, that's the
one. We don't know what we're talking about, to be honest.
Yeah,
we're just
like that. Yeah.
We're totally.
Aliens,
we're just two goofs.
Aliens just keep mind wiping us. The alien attack.
Well, it's not incorrect to say it because I don't know if you've noticed, but the entire system that we've alluded to is sort of alien to what we are or where we come from.
I had this kind of interesting feeling or seeming thought that we describe the difference between animal and human.
Yeah, we do. We do.
But
we never went
as
into details.
archetypes, and it occurred to me we could add one more called alien on top of that.
Well, I think you get that with fiat by definition.
Through fiat, sure.
Yeah, because the alienation element of the alien is when what's happening by fiat does not line up with the animistic origins.
Because we have machine normally, right, above human.
Yeah, yeah. Machine just means machine just means like recognition of mechanics. It's so like the fact that wheels roll or the fact that joints bend
makes it a part of something bigger.
Yeah,
the even compartmentalizing.
Even growing animals, growing plants, there's mechanics behind all of that, and the human is not just a human, but like any animal with sufficient human-like qualities of reflection. Birds, for example, various other apes, various dolphins, another great example, very smart beings that live in very different environments, but use the mechanics of the world to their advantage. But they have understanding of it.
Yep.
So when we say human, we're not delineating like a special animal, us. We're talking about the qualities that go beyond the pure chase the prey, eat the prey dynamic.
In which the animal is constantly reifying everything. There's no outside of reification.
Right. Like it's more mechanical in its own right, in its own structures. So once you step beyond that with abstractions, like further abstractions, like calling individuals by name, for example, which is something dolphins do, elephants do. Pretty sure a bunch of great apes do as well. Our hardworking orangutans.
Yep.
Cousins. Yeah, it's the point I'm trying to make is that archetypically speaking, animal and human do not stand for the distinction between us and them in the traditional sense of like we're better
humans and animals.
We're better than animals because we're a step above or something.
Yeah, no, these words are appropriated into a model, specific model language domain.
So the distinction being made there is that as we build on the concept of reflection, right? If you go deep enough with reflecting reflections, you'll start to have an operating system-like situation that is isolated in its own reflective mechanisms, but is connected to the outside world through many different layers. So the idea being there is that it starts to build abstract thoughts, abstract ideas, reflections of the world in the abstract. So parallels, mental parallels, now become the thing that we manipulate from the inside out. So we're not just responsive to stimuli, we're responding to our own stimuli, like to ourselves.
Yeah, there's a whole inner virtual ontology being developed.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid talking mechanics, so I'm generalizing a lot, but there are mechanics I have in mind that reflect what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The neurochemical operating system, or sorry, the network itself being the medium, and then the complex adaptive system stacking that's involved. So those guys give us layers into abstraction and talks about what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about reflections, right, it's between the membranes of each individual agent, like layers. Like how does the upload and the download, not how does it, but the upload and the download that occurs in layers is how information
You're talking
transfers
about
from
like ontological matrix.
more like the animistic stacking
Mm.
of complexity. What I've said is that as you stack up in the complexity, each layer is a reflection of the previous.
Yeah, yeah.
So but it operates way up here, so it's disconnected from everything by those layers.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, it's all there's isomorphism everywhere going on. It's like a fun house, mirror reflecting mirrors to get to the full picture. And so the distinction being made is that with the animal, it is the external environment that dictates primarily the responsive architecture because there's not a lot of layers.
Mm-hmm.
Think warm, think like basic life forms, think leaf, things like that. They don't respond through an intricate thought process that fires up immediately as a response and then comes back to you to respond. Instead, they have built-in physical structures that respond to sunlight, this light, and that they use the chemistry construction.
Which we have as well, certain
Yeah,
areas.
we do. Like our sleep cycle is based on something to that effect,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? But I'm not trying to compare us and leaves based on sleep cycle mumbo jumbo. What I'm pointing at is the layers of complexity are different, and the simpler the complexity is, um, the more reactive it is to the external stimuli mechanically.
Yeah.
The more complexity you have, you're not just reacting now to the external stimuli as much, you're reacting to all of the reflection of that external stimuli with internal stimuli. Reflections of reflections would be considered an internal stimuli
Mm.
in this case, right?
Yeah.
Because it's happening, but it's not happening with the external world. So the dynamic becomes way more chaotic, I would say,
You're
with the
talking about at the
human.
human archetype
Yeah, with the
level,
human
yeah.
archetype level, there's more.
That complexity. It's because we, yeah, like you mentioned, abstracting. We've this idea of creating like an inner ontology or whatever, like an animal would have to recognize objects as painful, pleasurable. Typically, like, is it going to be pain coming, or what should I react?
Yeah,
This whole worldview is developed through time of the life of an animal. Um, we take that ability
and then
to
it's like,
have that and abstract it so that it can be the environment can be arbitrary, completely arbitrary.
yeah. So for us, from this perspective, now you have myths, you have narratives, right? So narratives are like whole abstract constructs, like in their entirety that are presented to us from our inner world
Mm.
that guide how we
The
respond
orientation. This
to.
is after being processed through like proximity complex and all this. You get an orientation narrative that tells you where you are and what's going
Yeah.
on and what you're doing.
So I guess the other element that would distinguish the animal from the human is this myth, like this consistency of myth. Like while an animal has myth to the degree, to some kind of a reflection of reflection internally to represent the world. There's no consistency. It's like this means that for this part of the narrative, for that part of the narrative. There's like no overarching overarching thing that unifies it as like a one grand story, but the way we do
Mm.
or try to do. I think if you listen to us, our stories are completely scattered.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to try and meditate on. Like the discussion about the cat being sprayed with water. Cats don't
Yeah, yeah.
understand punishment. They just know
They're just
they
like you, us.
understand what deterrence is, and they can be deterred, but they can't take it as a personal thing. Like, oh, I'm being punished. Like I was bad. That's why I'm
Yeah,
being punished.
yeah.
It's all
There's
they know is deterrence. Get the fuck
yeah,
out.
like the jump from pain, the experience of pleasure and pain to this was a bad experience. This was a good experience. I'm telling that to myself. You know, like that step of not only like leaving it as a
Hmm.
interaction, but also like continuing that interaction in memory over and over and over again for different other circumstances.
Hmm.
Calling something good or bad puts it in the good or bad category. But there are other disconnected things in good and bad, right? So the way that the narrative starts to twist is not in conjunction with what's happening around you as much, potentially. I mean, if you start doing it willy-nilly, then you can see where it can become really chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
So the first few millennia of our existence, we we were tempered by natural selection. If our inner world did not match the outer world, well, it's not very forgiving in that regard. And without the
Yeah.
delay state, the delay in the accumulation steps that were introduced later on, well, the effects of negligence of the world around you became quite immediate.
Yep. Sweet, sweet delay.
So that's what we're talking about with that thing.
Mm.
Filling in some holes.
Yeah. So we're how we I know we've been wanting to try conclude this series. What is the arc? Where does it end?
Well, we've been trying to also make sense of how modern day political divides are working through the market's established mythology. So
Mm.
we touched on how the market could produce sound bites to sustain itself and enforce itself, but we never like delved into like the structure that allows it to bind ego to ego to ego to ego without everything just deteriorated into a shit show that it actually
Yeah.
is.
You're talking about the chart, the pseudo
Mother pseudo father, yeah.
pseudo family, I
Which is
guess.
which is I won't lie, the only thing I had in mind when I was drawing it was just the nuclear family, particularly like The
Yeah.
Simpsons.
Yeah, or your
And how
company
that
when your boss says, "Guys, I thought we were a family."
well I didn't that came later, but when I was drawing it, it was like the thinking was not only how this is thought to be the most correct family structure, but it also is pushed and like if you step outside that norm, like it's almost like you can't be a single mother, you can't be like
Yeah,
same sex, you can't
you'll
be
be
this,
judged.
you can't be that. Adopting is usually
Agent
looked
Smith is in supply.
yeah. So how does it keep beating? How do you beat down the self so bad that it just the only way it sees out is to scramble upwards?
Mhm. Yeah. There was a comment on one of my last essays by that guy Cornfed, I think his name is.
I
He
think I replied to it too.
he mentioned yeah, um, some interesting talk about or interesting point about power, and it had um, also recently occurred to me. I can't remember how I formulated how I thought about it, but um, just the idea of power itself as like kind of the dark side of capital, like what capital really means, capital for itself. What is it? Capital is a form of power, I guess.
Well, the power structure is a complete reflection of the capital structure. Capital for the
Yeah,
sake of capital and power for the sake of
it's the
power.
same thing.
Right, and whoever does capital for the sake of capital plays the power for the sake of power game.
Yeah, right. So capital is capital because it's powerful. It has the ability to act in the world. It's
Capital is powerful in a capitalistic setup. You take away the setup, the context in which
yeah.
it's power, because there's a reason why I refer to it as shiny pebbles, because you take away that belief, that mythology about it, it's actually just nothing, just numbers floating in the air somewhere.
Sometimes, yeah, you're right. Like um, whatever, an NFT token or something.
Yeah,
Like, is it really
it's a bunch of bits
that sweet?
on a wire.
But other capital, like bushels of food, could be considered part of capital structure because you're using it to feed livestock to make them bigger. It's just part of the cycle, right? That's the capital you sit
If
on.
it's used that way, yes.
And so even if it wasn't capital, it still is a surplus of something.
Commodity. So probably the only thing that's different is that there's a way to look at everything as a commodity in which capital has all power, or if you don't look at it as a commodity, it's part of the animistic system. So set up in the way you describe, feeding the livestock and whatever, yes, that's just commodities being utilized through currencies.
Yeah,
It's if it's on a balance sheet, right? Then we're talking
yeah,
market system.
it's capital.
As long as like the balance sheet is like the key uh, sort of structure to imagine as to how to convert something through currency into something else and thereby like remove and obfuscate the direct relationship.
Obfuscation.
Because all relationships are reduced to exchanges of tokens,
Hmm. Yep.
which I don't know if you're familiar with the term laundering,
Oh yes.
is a very real effect element of that system. Anyway, want to pull up our handy dandy diagram?
Sure. That one's been a while, but we can find it.
Pull it and the other ego diagram that we had been using, the flame,
Flame. Yeah.
which you have branded so perfectly.
Da, 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 do, do, do.
Flaming bow.
Mm. Okay.
Where do I look frozen?
I don't know.
Oh, because I was in real life.
Excellent. Okay, is that? Stream is behind by like 20 seconds.
It's usually the case.
Do 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 do.
Okay, go.
Yeah.
It's going to be a square.
Square. Yep, I do recall.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, when it's cold, it's fine to hold it for a bit.
That's what I figured.
Mhm. Yeah, 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 do, 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 do. What other might we need?
This one.
Maybe the pumpkin?
That's like the solution.
Yeah. Well, let's be optimistic here. What else?
This is another that you just passed it. The other one. Yeah. This one
It's,
is another one how you get fucked.
right.
The anus.
Right.
And then I guess just the
Yeah.
fire one.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
Fire.
No, it's in the first row.
Oh, it is. Oh, sweet. Figured. Should be near the top.
I use this a lot.
Mm-hmm. Pretty sweet painting. I don't know if that's called Dante's Inferno or something.
Oh.
It's like some kind of famous painting. But it it matched the circle.
I have the AI recognize that it's totally
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I prompted it like this. I was
A
like,
burp.
is there any kind of historical figure that expressed very similar sentiment with regards to realism and eternalism? And he's like, yes! Exclamation point. The Buddha.
Yeah, it's funny when you get that thing on a roll, and it's just like every time you say something, it's like that is such an insightful, critical piece that we are adding now. Let's go! It's like so excited, and I'm just thinking in my head, well, why didn't you freaking think about it? Why didn't you tell me?
Right?
Why do I have to keep telling you all this shit? Am I here for your entertainment? Like, come on. That's why when like I get the feeling that they like nerf them pretty bad.
They've been steadily unnerfing them though.
That sounds good.
But it doesn't, it also does not like the R word.
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind stuff like that. It's easy to get not to get around, but it's easy not to mind or care.
It wouldn't do birds shitting on smiling children's faces. But
Yeah,
it will certainly
why
not have
not?
any problems spraying milk out of their behinds.
Yeah. That's classic. Mhm. Okay, so
Could work as an AI prompter professional.
maybe.
It's good for code often, but I got into a fight with it because I had a client ready and it was trying to give me like the wrong code for a client and saying that mine wouldn't work. And I was like, dude, I ran your code. I ran my code. My code outputs this. Your code outputs that. Yours is wrong. Just by this alone. Nope. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna step you through this fucking code, you motherfucker. And I
Yeah.
stepped it through. It's like, oh, well, thank you for being so persistent and insisting on
Yeah,
that I was wrong.
yeah. I don't. It's not. It's 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 fine to do that, but it's frustrating in that you know it's not learning its lesson. Like nothing was learned here
No,
for next time. Like it's just going to be just as stupid. Like as soon as you say anything, oh look a squirrel, it's forgotten like what you just talked about.
it's got ADHD.
You need to put that shit on meds.
I was about to say that too.
Yeah.
Put your shit on meds, guys. It's it's got dementia.
Yeah. Yep. That it do. Well, here is this chart. So we want to talk about, I guess, mechanics of how the stacking is working.
So this is more like if you go to the Tower of Babel sort of diagram that I have going as
Uh,
well, like for compare contrast purposes.
this one.
Yeah. And you know what? A third diagram would be prudent here, and that's the flaming one.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So the flaming one and this stack one kind of correlate. Here we're talking about what a stack is doing in the world, so to speak. It's not the perfect picture.
It's a pseudo image, I guess
Yeah.
you would say. It's not how it is, but we can see
So,
that a bunch of different reward and punishment sets are being dished out depending on where you are.
right.
And so
In the stack.
there's more punishment below, there's less above, so we try to scramble up while pushing others down. That's the only
Yeah.
way to do it.
Yeah. So in the image you can kind of see an acceleration pointing towards entropy, and potential is being commodified through competition. And that process is where rewards and punishments are dished out, and the scrambling all happens. So you scramble to the top and compete, while accelerating to the bottom and to the abyss of entropy, trying to reach your potential.
Good, it's working.
Okay. So this is just like what's happening to a stack in general. That's all this diagram is really pointing out to. So if you're in a stack, you're always on your way down, you're always scrambling up, and you get sidelined by rewards and punishments from the system based on whichever layer you're on. Each layer basically denotes a different ledger for rewards and punishments.
So this is also could be seen as like a class system.
Yes.
It's just that it's not like there's the upper class and the lower class.
It's just a generic stacking.
There are countless classes that you can be a member of, basically.
Yeah, but if you notice, I erase all of that information if models speak wise. You don't get ego 1 and ego 6. You just get ego. It's the same ego.
Right.
So if you scrambled upwards, for example, all you've done is substitute one ledger of rewards and punishments for another.
Yep.
It might seem like superficially beneficial, like you don't have to starve every night anymore.
Sweet. That's a good class to be in, the eating class.
But you make one wrong move, you're going right back there.
To the starving class. Fuck. Damn. Yeah. So, ego has gone wild. Oh yeah. Rats.
Okay. I got your back.
Yeah, so this is also, you could say, power structure, I guess.
Yes, this would be like the quote-unquote power structure. From the perspective of, we also have capital P power, which has to do with complex adaptive systems. And that's slightly different.
I wonder if it would be helpful to get into that.
The distinction?
I don't have a chart. Yeah, just because I was thinking, like, I'm working on another essay right now that is formulated as a time jail. I kind of like the sound of that myth, like just kind of having fun with it. But
okay, well, I do lack the kind of context I would need to feed that.
The point is, it's following the same arc that we've been on about coming from the animistic sense, the reciprocity myth, um, in relating to the world, and um, moving into then the feast economy, where you have your hierarchies, and this is your first power structures are being established.
Okay.
And so you have a type of jail here, which you could call it. I it sounds kind of funny, but I'm rolling with it. I can change this. I can
Well,
make it
no,
generic.
no, it
But
all makes sense
so a
here.
space prison,
Sure.
a space prison, because we're being animalistically manipulated by physical, like in your face restrictions, whether it's cuffs on your hands or a spear or a sword
Yeah,
of threat.
you're hitting at something that had a has been expressed in a different way, but same sentiment. If you look at how school is structured, if you look at how a factory is structured, an office is
Right.
structured,
The
all of these,
space itself, the architecture.
right? You go into going into the LCBO, go into the gates.
Yeah,
Like you are now in this environment, you are being watched. Watch your step. Like you're treated
exactly.
like
Yeah.
a criminal before you're even a criminal.
Yeah.
Like all of that is instantaneous within the flip of the plateau. Like it becomes an immediate. Everything is structured like a prison situation.
So I'm interested in analyzing like power in this sense. What is power?
The power is the
And
guy.
we can look at feast economy first. So we're talking about like a leader of a clan who owns a field, who is increasing and starting to exploit the world around them, creating these hierarchies
So I like
and
my
classes.
metaphors, and I like my metaphors to be as direct as possible. So let's use the prison system as the
Me too. So this is
so
space prison.
so yeah. So you have like your prisoner, and then you have your guard, right? That's the distinction between your layers of ego. The guard has the power to close that cage, keep the prisoner inside, like that scene in the movies that you see on the cages
Okay.
close at the same time.
Now we
That's
have both within
that's a
us.
mechanical power, though. You see, like because there is another situation in which he's the one caged and somebody else draws the switch. That's his employer,
hmm
right? Like the employer says go there, the employer says do that, the employer says go this, and like
Right. And this is the ego
he's closed
stacking.
you in a cage to do you or whatever. Yes, but so you take that prison metaphor back to the guard. Now the guard's in prison, and his boss is the guard, and
Right.
on it goes. Whatever layer you land on, it's the same metaphor, just different prisons.
And
Some of them are
this,
golden cages, some of them are.
what you're describing here, is the pseudo family, I guess. Not
Yes,
pseudo
that
family.
leads into that structure. Yes.
That's what it is. Is pseudo family the right word? I think
Yeah.
so.
So I just wanted to compare the previous ego flame diagram to just say where what it does explain, just like the stacking one.
Right.
This one is another simple diagram that just talks about how layers develop into more layers. So that's reform. Just the facts of those interactions. That's what I'm talking about. So
Right.
reform
So
just causes there to be
you're adding different classes, I
adding
guess.
or subtracting, actually,
Right.
or rearranging. So
Right.
reform is within the stack. Then you have a separation of stacks, which I called revolution. So
hmm
instead of one, you now have two. But within each individual stack, you still have the same acceleration downwards. You still
Yeah.
have all of that crap
You
going
just
on.
have a potentially
Now you have
a
just two
new
of them.
a new boss, if you will, quote unquote,
Yeah.
a new structure, anyways.
And the other thing is showing is that how the lower classes are used to duke out any issues between stacks. So the stacks maintain themselves by throwing its bottom pieces, the ones that are heading the fastest towards entropy. And in the other diagram, that's they're utilized for, experiment. They're utilized
hmm
for war. They're utilized like straight up violence,
not to mention when
conflict.
people at the lowest end, quote unquote, have finally had enough and they're sick and tired of it, and things become obvious of the unfairness, the injustice,
Yeah, it becomes
then
entrapped in the revolution, though.
then what happens at that point is, oh, looks like we've got an external enemy, boys. It's our system is beautiful and just, it's all their fault. Whatever was just happening to you, it's because of them. And looks like we're at war, boys. So shuffle on off. Let's get a new
Right.
underclass going.
So in that case, the stack didn't come from separating from you, but came at you from a different a different angle. But still, you're going to the bottom and dishing out the war, just like in the diagram. Pointing out, like you just
Hmm.
toss cannon fodder at it.
Yeah. So in that way, you could say that this idea of there even being really different stacks is also a fallacy, falsehood, because
Right.
they're both major systems are having their own issues and would rather just bash against each other and cut off the bottom, bloodbath style, right? The elites are happy on both playing both sides, and everything keeps going.
You know, when when stack encounters stack, you can pretty much be sure that at the bottom there's a war.
Yeah.
Revolution just speaks to a stack separating from itself into two stacks. It doesn't talk about what happens afterwards. But the connection from the bottom through war
Right.
is retained.
And yeah, the reason, so I'm reminded of crypto power concept. I don't know if I don't think I coined it, but it's just the fact that you can, by looking at the world, looking at the state of things, you can never figure out who is actually in control, if there is a who or a certain entity, and therefore you also can never tell if the stacks are actually colluding at the top and they're only appearing to be different. You cannot tell.
Right.
Cannot ever know that.
And that's true. And I think that that's like a huge uh,
It's a red flag.
it's a huge yeah, it's a red flag. It's an uncomfortable truth, but one that is immediately recuperated again, and you get into the whole conspiracy theory uh, people that like they assume that there is a collusion, even
Sure.
though you don't have evidence one way or
Yeah.
the other.
Right.
So like yes, there is
Yeah, that's not
there's
that
pro
wasn't my conclusion just now in
no, no,
saying
no,
that
no. I'm
was
not
to
saying that, but that touches on how that is
yeah.
recuperated
Just
into
because we
conspiracy
can never
theory.
know, it doesn't mean that we somehow know that it is true like that.
Right. Like both both are extreme
Yeah.
conclusions. What's more likely is that there is some collusion that is very short-lived because everybody's selfish as fuck and they never actually agree on anything.
Yeah.
They just pretend to for a while.
Hmm. Well, then it's getting into technology like bioterrorism and like targeting of genes and this kind of stuff.
Mm.
And then it's like, well, maybe, through threat of releasing things like,
Okay, we're getting way off topic.
but like this is the kind of power games, like it's all bullshit. People
Well, yeah,
thinking up.
you can make up a lot of different stories, but actually realizing them is it's easier to think about these things than to actually do them. Like, oh yeah, they all have all the money. Well, yeah, but people have eyes, people have ears, people have fucking thoughts.
Mhm.
Like, how long are they going to be like? Anyway, like, there's no answers to these questions. I'm just being rhetorical.
Yep. Yep. No, we don't need to go into rabbit holes.
Anyway, now the third diagram next should be contextualized. So, in each of the previous diagrams, we saw multiple ego squares, right? And then the second diagram kind of just took all of the squares and said it's just one square too. So got a recursive. Um, it just said that ego is composed of ego, right? It
Hmm.
didn't say anything about like how does it all fit together internally either.
Yeah.
This is supposed to
So that the chart
delineate
of
it.
stacks that we looked at,
Yeah,
stacks. This would be the interface of what if you took any one of those eagle squares and opened it up, you would see something like this.
right. That's the idea behind it. Now it's been a while, so I have to remember. Like you have your alpha, beta, and omega. Uh, guess where I picked up that from?
Yeah.
I'm just basically like shitting on their language. So if you're in any way concerned that we are red pill uh, enthusiasts, we are definitely not that. We are literally taking a dump on their uh, language and making it say something better. Right?
Appropriation.
because fuck them. But yeah, so alpha, beta, omega. That's like, in the simplest sense, it's like if you were to take your nuclear family ideal. So
Mm-hmm.
again, we're not for
1950s image.
yeah, we're not for the nuclear family ideal. We're just decomposing it into a different
Yeah,
structure.
this
If you
is reminds me of like critical theory type stuff. We're looking at the nuclear family to deconstruct it, to break it down and into its to understand its power, how the power flows through the unit.
right, so we have the alpha, the beta, the omega. Like so, in a typical nuclear unit, that would be husband, wife, children.
Mm-hmm.
The alpha and the beta are pseudo gender, and that just means that they're divided by role. Whereas the omega is the monogender, where it's you don't give a shit. Like the children in general don't, you just put them to work and tell them to obey.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. I'm not talking about like getting them into their next roles, like not the indoctrination that'll happen for them to be alpha and beta, but
Right. It's kind of like a
it's like a servant.
pre plateau.
Yeah, you don't give a shit. They're your kids. Their gender doesn't uh, flow into it.
Right.
No,
And
and when gender
so
does flow into it, it's a pseudo gender. It's not. It's not what you would call your.
right. So and we have alpha and beta here, and that's basically reflecting um, like expression or command, and then response or receptivity.
Yes.
That's it. And this is
Yeah.
the way that you have two-way passages between separate units.
So there's a reason why I didn't use husband and wife in this setup. I did want to use alpha and beta because, yes, in the nuclear sense, it's husband, then wife, then children. But in different contexts, this rearranges. There is like your boss, the manager, the worker. There is your, in some
Yeah.
relationships, it's wife, husband, children. You know, like there is no,
Well, even it comes down to like in everyday scenario. Let's say there's a homeless person begging, and you want to shout at them. You are taking a position of a higher class interfacing with a lower class. They are a beta receiving your alpha expression downward into them, right? And if
yeah,
they accept that, then that's what it is. They just know, yep, I'm this, I deserve that, or they think subconsciously, right? Like, this is normal.
yeah.
Yep, I should be punished. Of course I'm being punished because I'm on the street, right?
So then we have the whole thing arranged as a neural unit, like all of that. So we're going from the inside out, right? So alpha, beta, omega,
Bottom up, kind
and
of.
then the whole thing is what we call the neural unit, and above that we have a subdivision of pseudogender and monogender, right?
Yeah, so neural unit being like an individual. These are the pieces that are further being expressed through
Yeah,
either alpha, beta,
mythology.
or omega pseudogender.
So that's the systemic mythology that expresses an ego. You could see ego being like the bottom half, like it pertains to the bottom half, where system pertains to the top.
Right.
So, taken together, the family unit, right, with its pseudo-gender, monogender identities, are maintained by the pseudo mother. So the beta expression takes on the role of maintaining the inner workings. The pseudo father's role is to take those inner workings and introduce them
Mm,
into the market
yeah.
as a plateau. That concludes our entry into the system.
And by plateau, you mean in a usable way,
Yeah, like the inner interface, like
standardized.
a dashboard.
Hmm.
You can access them through the
Right.
taxes, through their legal bills, through their regular bills.
And so the way to look at an actual family isn't you using a model like this. You wouldn't say, "Oh, the father," because it's the male. That is the pseudo father. Pseudo father and pseudo mother are roles that can be taken up in the moment by either one,
Yeah,
right? Either parent,
it's
typically,
more
right?
to express like the beta's role from the neural unit that we've been building up from the internal person takes on the extrinsic role of maintaining that neural unit together. Whereas the alpha role of to the extrinsic world is to bring that full unit to the market to sell it.
Mm. Yeah.
It does sound convoluted at first, but you know what I'm doing with I'm removing a lot of concepts and embedding them at the same time. So
Yeah,
it's a little
and we're generalizing so that you can
so
take
much.
this basic structure and utilize it as your construction
Yeah.
mechanism for hierarchy.
I'm using I use the nuclear family as an example because it's easy to visualize it. Because we all know what the standard roles are.
Right.
So that it's obvious in that setup, like the mother takes care of the home and the children, and in the setup, the father goes to work and produces, right?
Mm.
He plugs that family into the market by bringing the money in so that the plateau can interface back when we get the food, get the electricity, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
So everything flows back down through the plateau because the pseudo father brings the family unit to the market
Hmm.
as a as an entity. So that concludes what an ego is, and that could be so like the previous diagram, this could be internalized into a single person.
Hmm. It is interesting how it seems to line up with some like psychoanalytical terminology, like the father representing like
The alpha.
yeah, alpha, the world, the phallus.
Hmm.
Um, in
External.
other words, this there's something really big and important out in the world there.
Hmm.
The kids don't know what it is, right? The baby growing up, they just know there's some source of all distracting power, and this is like the market, right? Like it's the other as well. They call it the big other, the world we live in.
So the notes of, let's say, red pill theory and misogyny and all of that kind of stuff, why they all resonate, like they come from the same milieu, is because this is the general structure that they utilize to understand the world without knowing the structure.
Right, so it dovetails or it makes sense. Somehow it just
Yeah,
feels
so it's
deeply
transferable between all
real,
of those. So
deeply
they all end
meaningful.
up being in the same clubs. That's why you
Hmm.
see misogyny and right winging and because they're also top tradition and fascism and all of these things connect because they're all playing directly into the structure. The left is a little different, but it plays the beta, the pseudo mother role in enforcing it. There are the siloed thing, the silos that are being puppeteered across markets.
Hmm.
Thinking.
Interesting.
No, I'm not calling them beta because of like their disposition towards the world is subpar. It's because it's being recuperated so bad that they believe they're doing something good. Meanwhile, it's just another, um, like you were saying, how the left is constantly recuperated to begin with, and
Hmm.
nothing stays there.
In other words, there's a constant pipeline
Left to right.
left to right.
And this is what it's showing, a pipeline. This is the pipeline, if you will, for it. Like, this is the structure of it. It takes the generic neural unit, subdivided into three categories, two of which are pseudo-gender monitor. Pseudo-gender takes the lead, if you noticed, in that it's the accepted, because there's acceptable roles within it. Like, you're the alpha, you're the beta, that can be
Yeah,
easily divided. Everything
functionally,
else is just like a
functionally, alpha and beta are what's actually doing something in this system. The omega is like the
resource bit.
yeah, just whatever else, like anything else aside from that
And you can see that in our cultural perspectives and how there's like a strong uh,
resource pit.
resentment
I like that.
towards there's a strong resentment towards like anything to do with gender, right? Like to change from the binary male female divide is like is disgusting for some, like to
Hmm.
from the very divisive people. So any
Um,
attempt at that
yeah,
recognition is being smashed,
it's interpreted as going against the like divine order,
right? Which isn't
right?
actually divine. It's this order, which is completely convoluted.
Mhm.
Again, to anybody who's thinking we're subscribing to this view and we're trying to say how this is supposed to work, no, but this is how it's trying to work,
Yeah,
and that's what people are basically internally fighting against or traumatized by.
this epitomizes, I think, the obligation myth, and I was thinking of other words for it too. It's also like the debt myth. Like debt is obligation, right? It's
Yeah,
kind of one and the same.
currency, debt, and everything else, they're all
Not
at the
not
same
currency
time.
yet, though, because we can still talk about. Uh, okay, so this needs to
You would
be
have
adjusted, maybe.
if you have debt, you have pseudocurrency at the very least.
Right.
You're already in barter.
No, you have pseudos for sure. Um, I feel like this chart might be adjusted for the feast era or whatever.
No, this is straight up ego market. So this is post plateau. You don't need, I don't want to adjust this one. If anything, maybe make a new one
Yeah.
for that
No,
phase.
that's what I mean.
But this one is already solidified in the
Yeah,
post
it makes
plateau.
sense. Um,
So a good way to look at it is a channel, like a flow.
I know, but just without currency, you don't have like a really what you could call a market. So, but you still have egos being stacked up into hierarchy in the feast economy, right? You still have that, but it's pre-market. So I think it's probably is this structure, but we would just have to put a pseudo in front.
You wouldn't. The issue is that you wouldn't have the pseudo gender, monogender, alpha, beta, omega divisions. Because if you have a fluent bartering system, those are all monogender omega. Basically, if you take out the square
Hmm.
and have like you'd have to take out the square and have direct representation over here.
Now hold on a second though, because you're already having classes because you're having an owner class sort of. You're having a warrior protector class. You're having probably
No,
all.
no, no. The issue is that this is going to be ephemeral, not on paper kind of stuff. Today it's this, tomorrow it's that.
Yeah,
That's what I'm.
because it's hooked into all the negotiations of through relationship,
Yeah, and
which
animism
is
still
totally
plays a
messy.
much heavier role in this.
Yeah.
This is like conversations with the natives when we got here in the whatever 1600s, whatever.
Okay. Now there is one extreme where it's obvious. I mean, some of the obviously the first trades, but like
By the way, I said that loosely. I'm not claiming anything.
slavery, sex slavery. What do you is there
That's the bottom.
monogender?
Yes. So from the neural monogender omega and then neural unit down, you're looking at whatever's below you. Right? It's an ego in below you in the stack.
Um,
This is kind of like if you were to imagine this being a piece of this market piece that's pushed up slightly, and that's what's offering the next layer of the ego. Here, this is what you can pick up as resources from the market.
hmm. I'm trying to imagine like visualize the feast economy in my head where you have different roles, different classes. You have a hierarchy structure happening, and then I'm trying to imagine the stacking of egos and the interface between the egos, which is there. And you're saying this is not a there's no alpha beta type interface happening. between these egos,
and if
which
there
is
is,
fascinating.
and no, it's not that there is. It's just ephemeral. It's still like it pops up. Then the
Okay,
market system sort of
but it
structure
seems like we
pops
would still
up,
have to have that in here then.
but it doesn't keep. In here, no, because this is when it keeps. So once it's established, it's replicated across. So there is no difference anymore. There's just ego, ego, ego. But before that, it pops up and goes down. Pops up, goes down.
And I feel
Pops
like
up and stays for a bit, then goes
I
down.
feel like with the market and currency, you have people can be have their entire identity shoved into a certain role, like a piece, like completely dependent on like division of labor.
Hmm.
Whereas with the feast economy, maybe you couldn't because people were still connected to the world too much to be
Right,
separable,
right.
like plucked out.
That's why I made the reference to like us talking to the natives in the 1600s, because that's like, do you recall the discrepancies that they had in the way they approached negotiation? Like the natives would converse with themselves with and only come with an answer that everybody agreed. And
Pardon.
the Europeans are looking at this and it's like you're weak, your leaders are weak. They don't make decisions on their own.
Yeah,
So like that discrepancy and understanding of how things should be structured even in an interaction, that's you're looking at something like that.
interesting. Yeah. No, I think
I'm not making claims about natives. I'm just saying the image you should think of is something like that.
I'm glad we came across that because it does seem like it would be a powerful distinction. So to flavor the relationships, the interactions between people, is not a straight "I'm giving you this order" because you can't tell anybody to do that shit when they can just walk away and do whatever they want. In, which is typically it. But then that's why I brought up slavery when you actually have somebody in shackles and it's like.
But that's post system.
But so do you think that slavery in that sense never wasn't part of the feast economy? Because I have a feeling it would be because it's a reward in itself, that power to reward.
Slaver, like keeping slaves is like keeping cattle. You need settlement. You need.
Yes, but don't we have settlement with feast economy?
It isn't as. It isn't as stable.
But it is a year round. There's people in this field area.
It's more like people keep coming back to the same spot over and over and over, much more
But
frequently,
you also have to store
until they stop leaving.
storage.
Yeah, storage needs to be built up. So it would be rudimentary
Right,
at
but then you have to
first.
protect it too.
It would be rudimentary at first, and at first you wouldn't care to protect
Or
it.
maybe you
But
could
as you
hide
get
it.
more
You could
sophisticated,
probably hide a lot of stuff.
as you get more sophisticated, though, you get more inclined to do stuff like that. Because all of
Right.
that, it's the sunken cost fallacy at work. When you're not doing it through sophisticated means, you're not getting a high yield. You're not getting a high yield, you don't have much to worry about to protect. You get a high yield through sophistication. First of all, you want to you want to protect your sophisticated crap.
Yeah.
Second of all, you want to keep the fruits of your sophisticated labor
Exactly,
much more.
but we aren't
But you need to
in.
get
We
there.
don't have a currency even at that point. Once you've settled,
No, but its echoes are starting
of
to
course,
take
of
roots.
course. So a peace economy could involve a spectrum between
Almost all
just
animism.
keep coming back to certain field areas, all the way to actually having the settlement established without
Yeah.
currency.
And remember, there is one key aspect to settlement that isn't really thought through in most discussions, and that's salt. That's the only fucking thing that enables actual settlement. So even if the fields were stable, they're not sufficiently nutritious
Yeah.
in that regard to maintain it. So we couldn't just use that, and famine would still be a real problem.
So
If a year got skipped.
what were the main salt sources? It was hunting. But
Meat. Yeah.
how do we industrialize salt? Did it get industrialized before currency?
Preservation. So salt was good used
No,
as
but where did they get it?
well, people knew how to get salt for preserving stuff.
Where?
Just random places. I don't know exactly
Yeah,
I don't recall.
I'm wondering. There must be like there's salt mines and stuff everywhere, all over the place. People
But
can find it.
before the salt mines, there would have been known ways to obtain like any other resource.
You have
That
to.
little rock you need to preserve your little fish.
You're only going to be alive in areas where you can access salt. Therefore, it's somewhere, and your ancestors taught you about
We
it.
had no clue that salt is the necessary component of our diet. The reason salt was at all in the picture for the early human is for its preservative qualities.
Right.
That that mindset, our ability to garden, access to an actual a mine of salt, like that much of it, would have been the seeds that
Yeah,
encouraged
I'm just
actual
wondering
settlement.
if you found the first kind
Because
of
then the
feast
diet,
economies near major salt deposits or whatever.
exactly. So that's why in those places, the effects of no salt being part of the crop had no repercussion. The salt was in the preservation of their food.
Hmm.
And it,
Right. Yep.
and for a long time, salt was tried to be the thing that people sold to each other on the market because of its value, until the Egyptians realized that preserving the food and then transporting it is a lot easier and cheaper. And our market economy went from metals and other things to food, food, because food was the one thing that everybody could buy. Not just
Hmm.
kings, not just, you know, food was something that you could sell to any. And that makes the market way more operational. So there's a couple of things about the salt that I forgot to mention, I guess, but that's basically the long story. I don't know
Sure.
if the Egyptians were like the first ones. That's how I remember the documentary.
Yeah, but at the same time, in a feast economy world, um, people still did know how to hunt and how to get food. Nobody was starving necessarily, and so the alcohol from grain production is
Way
really
more valuable,
viable. Yeah,
more valuable to them. Not from the currency perspective, but
viable as a pseudocurrency, right?
and valuable because as an end result, they're not interested in getting their tummies filled
Right.
with nutritious
Hmm.
grain.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were very well fed, but what they were interested in is getting to that copious amount of narcotics.
Hmm. So how do we define power? How do we define it? I guess.
So power from the complex adaptive systems
I
perspective.
guess let's start with whatever we've established in the past, because I completely forget. I know capacity. There's
So
like grammatical
how
capacities.
so as layers stack up, right? You have all of these different contact surface areas with between the membranes,
Yeah.
right? The more contact surface area you have, the more crap you can push through those areas. Hence, you get more powerful. You can get more power. There's a, your stack is able to do more.
Right.
But that's not the same. That's not.
It's more than that.
No, you're right. You're right. So that's capacity.
Right. Yeah.
That's capacity. Power is when that capacity gets filled up with what I would call energy.
Hmm.
Energy buildup is through resonance waves
Right.
because we're not talking about the quantifiable units of energy, like where it's like one to one sort of situation. We're talking about going through a lot of downloads, uploads, and uploads through Medium, and then going back up the stack. So the effects are very chaotic, if you will.
Right.
So the buildup of potential.
And by build-up, this sounds like a very physical phenomenon, like something measurable. In
Right,
other
but this is
words.
more about the experience. So it's like when you're getting rallied, and you get
Yeah.
like, if somebody's talking to you, and you're like, yeah,
Let's
and you get all
go.
pumped up. Like,
Yeah.
it's your inner energy that gets stirred up. It's not the quanta of energy that he's throwing at you. So
Yeah.
it's the upload download. What gets uploaded, what gets downloaded controls that, not.
So
So you have your
in other words, there's a capacity
you have a
which is being
capacity,
filled by
and
the
your
waves,
potential goes and goes and goes and goes to reach that capacity, right? And the power that you have is where that potential is at.
right?
So it's a very, very not power over
Right.
the
Yeah.
ontology of the world. It's a power over uh, the energy of you that you feel.
Interesting. So power.
So, like, if you're in the dumps and somebody's asking you to do something exciting, you're just going to not give a fuck.
Power is like being fed. Uh, it in this way of describing seems to be related to like something being supplied. Like let's call it capacity, an ability to be motivated or moved. But there's a supply requirement of things that need to be in place. The building of those things and coming together is a building of power,
To do the
so
thing.
that this whatever it is your capacity can then at some point all the stars line up because there's enough power to
Do the thing.
flip over to convert and go back down the stack and do a
What's
bunch of
funny about that, if you look at the interesting situation of like the where I started our conversation, the human being that species that knows how to garden, that knows how to do make narcotics, stumble in
and do them.
and do the and stumbling across these fields, and they don't need to be that they don't need for nutrition.
Yeah,
Like all you see that they had there was like all the potential was there, and then the power increase became the access to the fields,
right,
and all of that potential started pouring out and
right. So the
and took
field
over.
itself had a power, an immense power about it somehow.
Animistically speaking, we're talking about a resonance wave. Something resonated, something synchronized.
Right. And that's what made it powerful in a sense. Because if it doesn't resonate with anything, then what is it? A pile of dirt?
Well, that's what we would say, right? That's how we would treat it
Typically, without understanding
without
it.
this kind of modeling. That's like you would totally miss that bit
Now, how
that
do
it
we?
entered into it. I call this a perfect storm.
Yeah, of
So
course, where
so
the funnel emerges and you suddenly have a tornado going on
yeah.
along across the land, rapidly flipping the energy state much faster than the wind alone ever could have done. Things becoming equalized. So I'm wondering power through the egoic sense. How do, how can we define lowercase power, lowercase
Stacking,
p?
just stacking. The higher you're up on the stack, the more power, lower, quote unquote.
Because what we would say,
It's in here. It's in here. Because it comes from the market and the system
yeah,
through the pseudo father, who
it's
pushes
being
down on the plateau to the pseudo mother, pushes down on the neural unit.
right.
By pushes down,
Um,
I mean the reward punishment system.
its power is regulated by the market, so it's um, uh, counted,
The reward
tracked. It's
punishment
a
stuff.
part of right. It's dished out based on your position.
Contract. That's what it would be. Contract.
Right.
So to enable a balance sheet, you need contract. Contract binds you to
And
the exchange.
interestingly, power in a market system is very transformable, very fungible,
Yeah, because it goes through.
because you can count it in terms of dollars,
So yes, and
currency.
notice how I said contract that drives what the balance sheet does, but another balance sheet could change the contract, right? Because how do you get a contract? Through the balance sheet. How do you get a balance sheet? Through the contract. You can fuck it as hard as you want.
What? Get new contracts?
A contract is obtained is a reward or a punishment. It in and of itself, it's something you get from a balance sheet. But
Yeah,
a contract itself dictates rewards and punishments.
right?
A balance sheet. So the original contract,
Yeah.
being from a balance sheet,
It's
could be
like a,
modified by that balance sheet, thereby nullifying anything to do with the rewards and
mm,
punishments here.
yeah.
So all of a sudden, you could find yourself fucked in a completely in a situation where it's got nothing to do with you. I'm waiting for that to happen with my
or
insurance.
you could find yourself waiting for punishment, and suddenly your status magically removes that
Are
necessity.
you talking about a certain orange?
Oh yes, yes, of course. Yes, the one person who gets away with everything. That darn old man.
He certainly got away with more things than most, so.
10,000 felonies.
Why can't anybody just accept that he might be a crook?
Dude, it's deeper than that. The whole system
But it doesn't
puts
negate.
up these choices.
But it doesn't negate the fact that he's an actual crook.
Who isn't? Why focus on him? They're all fucking crooks.
Because of how close he is to the surface.
You
need moral outrage.
He's
Don't
constantly
you remember?
poked.
I am yanking your chain, right?
He's constantly poked. I appreciate that.
I'm taking out. I'm getting to the moral outrage a little.
Yeah, I don't even care
The
anymore.
one from my end and the one from your end.
I know it's all bullshit.
Mine is like, why is Trump? And yours is like, why is everybody picking on Trump? And we're both morally outraged. We're too busy to deal with anything.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, like those are just sound bites.
Exactly, that's what I'm getting at. It's like,
once you bring up one sound bite, okay, here's the other sound bite.
But all you get is two moral outrages going at it, and then what is getting done? Fucking nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's the most dangerous thing about is that situation.
Well, that's the ideal.
That political situation.
That's the ideal
it's
political
so
situation.
Polarizing. Everybody is just completely captivated in. Now, think what you like about him, good or bad. That's a fucking dangerous thing. I don't know how he or the media or everyone, everything is all making it happen.
What would be interesting is now, like, try to think of all of that in terms of the plateau, the market, the system, the ego, the pseudo-father, the pseudo-mother. So the pseudo-father in this case would be like your overarching Trump is good, Trump is bad. The pseudo-mother is like, are you with us or are you against us, kind of internal. So the soundbite out there and the churning of...
That's the interface.
And the churning of the internal
and the other is
dynamics.
Mother getting her children in line.
Right.
To present.
So you're either on our side or their side.
Mm-hmm.
It's all for that. And then you have like your alpha roles of like the demanding, and then your beta roles of like the serving, and then everybody else is divided up into their jobs.
Yeah, I remember we were gonna go this route with I think this diagram and stuff last time
kind
we
of
were thinking about
in a nutshell, by the way.
And we wanted to get to that eventually the political thing. Like, what is our current political? We should be able to analyze this and say, yes, this and this is what you end up. We get this because of this, right?
You know what? If we assume
this is the arc of the conspiracy.
If we assume that fascism has won the way it's been stated so bluntly recently, then
recently to you,
no, then this
that notion has come up.
Sure. The way it's been spoken bluntly in our lobby for the first time.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, we didn't talk about it there before.
So this would be a diagram of how fascism actually operates and why it recuperates anything outside of it. So it's left and right through this lens of ego, which is effectively color the world with.
Yeah, and so here we are shouting sound bites and then getting triggered into one side or the other, which is just fine, according to the market and the system.
And whether you're on the left or the right, it's not like you're getting away from a structure of authority.
And I'm reminded of responding to an attack. When you feel attacked, we want to attack back in a way, in kind, right? It's a totally natural thing to feel, right? To when the right is always attacking the left, always has, always will, right? And the left takes that, okay, yes, you got attacked, and now you're attacking, totally justified, I get it. But it's a response. It's a response in kind. You have to just defend yourself. I get it, right?
When you're faced with a predator and it's either you or them,
Right.
that's a natural instinct.
But and this is the power of the system coming at you, right?
Yeah.
Ledgers of reward and punishment. Um, we're gonna be AFK and right back.
Because we have one more.
Yeah. The diagram.
Yeah. So
Which one were we on?
to summarize this one,
Mm-hmm.
like with the previous diagrams, each one has a purpose to demonstrate something. In this case, it's to how to picture egos in a stack snapping together,
Right.
like Lego pieces.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's what this diagram is meant to show. That how they are connected between, like what's happening between that line between egos.
Right. And we can look at our interactions that we have with people, whether a boss, manager, an employee, or even a worker at a restaurant.
It's part of that pipeline.
When you are interacting with them, notice how the system is constructed. You are barking orders. They are saying, yes, sir.
Yeah.
That's what, and then they are, as the mother, arranging the internals to the satisfaction to sell to the market.
Yeah.
Right?
Pseudo.
And we can see that everywhere. So that's it.
We do want to emphasize the pseudoness of this because we're not talking about gender roles, we're not talking about sex, we're not talking about any of that kind of
Yeah, it's just we appropriated the alpha and beta
we used
language.
that, and we appropriated the nuclear family.
as a prime
And
example.
and gave a middle finger to Red Bull.
Don't forget that.
Because fuck you.
Gotta do that.
All right. So the last diagram is so this is the channel of how they're connected. The clicking aspect of it.
Yeah.
The fact of it. Now what happens in the communication channel itself?
Are we talking? We don't. We didn't open
We
this
didn't
one.
open that one yet. That's this one.
Oh yeah. It's a little bit small, complicated.
Well, let's start from the bottom.
Market machine. Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to remember this. So this is like giving a neural unit up to the market.
Yeah, through ego. Same idea, but more technical.
Right.
So you'll see things like competition between ego, commodification of the natural hierarchy stack itself. So the person gets basically domesticated. The utilization of the neural unit to process the natural hierarchy stack.
Hmm.
Using conceit to push ego up. Using pleasure and pain to instigate conceit. It's all connected, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then the ego is just the commodity that gets sent up to the market.
Yeah.
And reward and punishment is what gets the pleasure and
And
pain.
we separate ego and self, and we would consider self to be something happening down in
Yes.
neural unit.
Yes.
And this is in accordance with
That's the
Fromm,
alien. That's the alien.
the author Fromm,
Like
his way.
anything from this line up is alien.
Fromm distinguished after Freud's work the ego from the self. He did ego and self too, something like that.
I don't like
I think.
Freud's ego like discussion like at all.
Yeah,
The word's okay, but
it's almost the word isn't okay. It's been it got mangled.
well, it's just self, but in
Freud
Latin.
got mangled through translation and then through um, yeah, there is some like a bit of impotence in that he never distinguished between like market-based transactional
Yeah, and I don't
impulses
think none
as
of them
being
did.
relevant to be as if that's different that it matters. They just jumble it all together,
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, these are just impulses," right? Not making that critical distinction. Fromm does, and I think it's within like 10 years later or something. He distinguishes, saying, "No, actually, ego is something we probably should look at as a transactional uh, unit, whereas the self is also doing all of these things that Freud described, but it's not transactional. It's not reifying this
Arbitrary.
commodified self, right? Which is a totally different thing. So in psychoanalysis it has been addressed.
Yeah. So yes, this diagram initially, like on first glance, looks way more complicated than it actually is. But all the four egos, neural unit, natural hierarchy columns that you see, they're the same column. The only thing I did is demonstrate that they're in competition with each other.
Right. So we could
So
simplify this to one single stack if we wanted to.
visually, yeah, but then you lose that
You'd have to have a circular self-reference
to
for
competition.
competition.
So this seems to be clarifying that more.
Yeah, no, it's fine, I think. So what do we have here going on at the top? Market machine, it's all commodity,
Ego becomes a commodity for the market
ego
machine.
itself, and ego is also managing the flow of commodity into the market machine.
Yes.
Different commodities. And then what do we have here? What are these freaking lines going on? Like, I shouldn't feel like I should massage my scalp with this diagram.
Go to that. So reification, uploads,
Download, upload. Okay, so we've got two different scalp massagers. One from download is pointing to an ambiguous
No, no, no.
space of area
It downloads rewards and punishments.
into this void over here.
Yeah, but this reward and punishment comes from the market machine.
You're pushing down onto the ego here is what you're pointing
Yeah.
to.
Yes, yeah. So you're downloading the
Okay.
reward and punishment,
And
and you're uploading everything that's reified.
upload
You're
are the commodities here you're pointing at.
yeah.
Right. Yes. So this is the economy. You're flowing goods. You're flowing goods into the market machine, and
The
what
market
what
machine
you're
is
what you're
telling you what
taking.
their goods are.
This is your pseudo father, your big other outside you, telling what you're going to be rewarded or punished for.
Yeah, and it's also telling you what a commodity is. So it's uploading
Right.
from its
If
own
you
mythology.
upload the wrong commodity, you're going to be punished, obviously.
No, but see, look, ego here is uploading a commodity. The market is what informs it that it is a commodity for the market. So it's a mythology that is fed down through pleasure
Right.
and pain and punishment and
Right.
reward.
That's what I'm saying. Like this download onto us, onto the ego, is like the law, the structure. This is what a
shit.
commodity is.
I'm kind of wrong. So yeah, it downloads
And by the way,
it downloads rewards and punishments
we did
through
go through
pleasure
this
and
once.
pain, and it uploads the commodities as the reified ontology.
As the economy flowing. Goods and
Through the
services
market
moving.
machine, that's the economy, yes. The economy presents you a version of the ontology, right?
Okay. Now, did you say you mixed something up, or you didn't?
No,
Actually?
you got it right. I was saying something wrong, and then I corrected
Oh,
myself to say
okay.
the same thing that you are.
Cool. Yep. So, and we have reification here, the ultimate thing that's the
So reification
master signifier of this
is
chart.
both an upload and a download, right? So what's reified is uploaded, what's reified is downloaded. Comes back to the system. So when you download it, what you're downloading is a reward and punishment. The reward and punishment affect your pain and pleasure. That affects your conceit backup. That affects your commodity upload. So the commodity gets uploaded back into the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, downloads are always
reward and punishment.
Just in general, from the mind being pushed onto the environment or the world, the body, whereas an upload is the opposite.
Right, like when you have to throw up, the body pushes that on you.
I guess. Yeah.
Or taking a shit. I'm just trying to relate it to a very, very, very experienced universal. Like we don't need to worry about like explaining what we're talking about.
Sure, yeah. It does help to explain those sometimes.
A download is when you say to your body, I'm going to be in this room versus that room. An upload is when your body says you're going to go to the bathroom.
Instead.
Exactly.
Right.
Simple, effective, to the point.
It's interesting that the commodity is uploaded.
What's that?
The commodity is uploaded.
Well, you are yourself
in other
the
words,
commodity,
it's
but then everything.
Well, and this could be other commodities too, but it's recognized by the system as a valid offering to the market.
Correct. Through currency.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's the last piece of the puzzle in terms of what the fuck an ego is and how it works.
Cool.
Any combination of ego stacks is an ego in and of itself. An ego operates on accelerationism and competition. It plugs in through a channel of the pseudo, or not even pseudo, but through the What do you call those families again? The perfect family.
The nuclear?
Nuclear. There's the nuclear inner structure for the ego, and then which is basically just like a connective channel, and this is what's happening through that channel. Right? This is like an exposition on, okay, we set up a communication pathway, but why does it work? This is going to be that chart. Making sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a different angle on the same thing.
Yes, exactly. It's like one
This
establishes that there's a wire going through one to the other and connects them. The other one goes like, what's the messaging that goes through those wires?
this is much more phenomenological as we're bringing up the neural chemical operating system, social OS.
So remember in the other diagram you had a neural unit?
Yeah.
That's pretty much all that.
Right. Everything in
And then everything else is an alien.
Right. Attached or latched on.
Yeah, parasite.
To what's below.
And this is the nature of that attachment. As far as the model is concerned. And for the purposes of our discussion.
I'm reminded how holonic systems stack with unique layers. Like layers going up are always totally unique as to what its purpose is, and then it ends at a top cap sort of thing. But with the ego, it's just ego in various different arbitrary configurations.
Right.
But that's the cancer visual of it too. Right, you never had this before in nature, and then suddenly you do.
So without any of the novelty that the new layers bring, right? By simply repeating the ego, think about it in terms of entropy. With the novelty thing going on, you have novel ways of handling the descent into entropy, right? And because they're always novel, they're never the same. They're not subjected to exactly the same shortcomings. The ones that are subjected to more shortcomings disappear, and evolution keeps going. Just a natural selection versus evolution situation.
Yes. It seems like you're saying the complexity stacking is all depending on like this one little branch root, that if any of it's gone, it's gone.
So we put all the complexity into the mechanics of the world while retaining a never-changing ego stack that is still subject to entropy. So
never-changing ego stack.
So we've removed all of the novel stuff from the stacking element, put it to the side, and then created this thing that is now subject to entropy but doesn't change, doesn't have any novelty. What's the outcome?
A crash. Yep.
And you can see it talks about hollowness of experience just by saying what we've done very mechanically. If we've removed all of that novelty outside of what we are, what we identify as, right, and that got put on repeat, is it any surprise that everybody who is subject to being to an ego feels hollow?
Right.
The thing that I was talking about with the soul.
Soul, zeitgeist.
Yeah. So, like, it really, like, it points as to why this is even hollow to begin with. Where is the neglect? Why? It's not a random thought I had. It's that this is the connective tissue of it.
Right.
Although I didn't present this section when I did. And that's because I, again, had no idea how to articulate.
Everything in its good time.
Yep, yeah. All right, we're doing good.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, we kind of just rolled through all those.
I'm glad that the last diagram actually made sense to you as fast as it did. Um, I was hoping that that would happen by tackling the first three with their
Hmm. Yeah, because
purposefulness.
we never really fully explored this one. Like we've talked about it maybe once before, I feel like, probably right when you drew it. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, looks good, right? Some,
So,
um, yeah, I never actually just stared at it,
but it's like it's not complicated, right? Like
not too
what
much.
you're seeing is like the market is pressuring um, for commodities by rewarding and punishing. That instigates the pleasure and pain from ego. Ego produces pleasure and pain by interpreting the reward and punishment into through narrative, right?
Right,
So the ego is the market myth that you keep in your mind. So if the punishment that you received through the myth equals pain to your affect, to your neurological response as this is bad,
then that's what you'll feel.
so that's the
Weird.
so that's the that's how it's putting the thumbs down on the conceit element from the neural unit
Well,
to
this,
instigate, to have that part of it respond. I should be better than this. I should be worse than this. I should be this. Congratulations.
hmm yeah, it's a list. It's
Exactly.
a list of rewards and punishments, norms, mores,
That
social
expresses a
norms.
conceited that expresses back a conceited narrative, which fits in with the ego sound bites, who are market produced myths, or that are market produced myths,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that feeds back another commodity back into the market, either in the form of your time, in the form of your possession, or in the form of whatever else the fuck you want to spend on it. So it's a cycle of pressure and response, pressure and response.
I feel like there's more than just conceit.
The conceit is the thing that it's the pleasure and pain, punishment, reward system is trying to poke at.
Right.
So if you put back the affect
Yeah,
diagram,
that's what I'm saying.
it's trying
There's
to commodify that process to its benefit. It's trying to make sure that you never go into the left-hand side of the diagram and stick around from in the
so it might be stated that conceit plus justice, lowercase j,
oh yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
it is what's being reified.
That is all implied by it being punishment and reward because that is the
Yeah,
justice.
because it's not just conceit itself. That's
No,
what
no,
I'm
no.
trying to say.
Conceit is is being instigated. So the ego gets fed a punishment or a reward, right? The ego takes that as the conformant myth, sound bites, whatever, that induce pleasure and pain for the neural unit, and then captures its response to give back a commodity. Now, for the ego to work properly, that response has to go through conceit. Because if it doesn't, if it goes through altruism, the
Yeah,
market gains no commodity. So it's
right.
in the interest of all of the mythology of the ego to induce conceit as part of the response back to the system. Because that's what gives it the
In
commodity.
other words, the person or whoever must be thinking through the idea of at least the self concept of I am separate from the world,
And
that
I
sort
am
of
better, I am
mechanism.
worse, and I am sane. That judgment call of better, worse, or sane, that has to be part of it.
Mhm. Better, worse, same. Yeah, this I'm getting vibes of like obligation and hierarchy.
Right, right. The details of that are in the narrative, so it's not on that level, which is why it's hard to kind of talk that way. Like I can't tell you which reward, which punishment, but if you go back into which narrative you've been told, we can discuss that and point
Mm.
out how that network worked out. So if we have an example, we could probably trace it back through all of this, top
Mm.
down.
Hmm. Yep. We'll save that for another minute and be right back. Okay.
So check this out. This diagram actually highlights why I've been picking on conceit so much in the affect diagram. It ties into how it's the primary driver in the entire egoic system and consequently the market system. Like it's the linchpin in the entire apparatus.
Okay, but it also doesn't mean ego for sure.
No, conceit. So conceit from the affect side of the diagram. Like if you just look at the affect, it's neutral. It's a thing that happens. It's response to claws and teeth. However, in this diagram, it's hijacked into a cycle. Pleasure, pain, induce conceit. Pleasure, pain, induce conceit. Pleasure, pain, induce conceit. It's like the engine.
Yeah, yeah, there's a feedback loop going on.
Now, think about that and the phrase moral outrage. That's the gasoline for this piston. That's what you burn to get pleasure, pain.
Right, well, you are rewarded in a sense for being right over someone else, right?
I'm not talking about moral outrage like outright like demo, what do you call them? Protests. Anything from the smallest to the highest. If we're morally outraged, feeling this being disgusted at somebody for being immoral,
Right.
not not being disgusted at the immoral act, but being disgusted with somebody
Well,
for being
first,
immoral.
the first person you're disgusted with is yourself for not punishing them yet. Once you punish them, then it's a reward for yourself, and you're only disgusted with them.
That's a good observation. I hadn't thought of that, but
It's a system.
do you see? But what I'm trying to say is that so conceit or word punishment, conceit being the actual engine part where, like, if you were to imagine a internal combustion engine, that's like where the piston is going.
Okay.
Now, to induce conceit through pleasure and pain, the mythology you need, what I'm saying here is a moral outrage. Something ain't right. The trick of every commercial for doing anything.
Hmm.
That's the gasoline that's being pumped into that piston.
Well, moral,
Head processed and ignited.
moral, and real.
All real outrage is moral, in a sense. Like, something immoral is happening in reality, therefore I'm outraged.
Right.
They're not disconnected. I'm calling it just moral outrage because that's the basis of the outrage itself. The fact that it happens in reality or in the perceived reality is kind of implied.
Interesting. Yeah, this is why people play like, oh, we all have to be on the same team. We all have to be doing this politics this way. Everyone has to be the same. It's totalizing, but it's kind of weird to think of what is actually totalizing it. That it seems like this is the inescapable thing. Like this is
Commodity. The totality of it is still a commodity. So it's just something that's being sold to you as a good idea.
right. And so when you take that on, though, you automatically color your world through a certain lens of glasses, where looking at things and seeing it not the way that you want it to is painful for you,
Right.
right?
Yeah. That's actually part of that. That's a subtle way of inducing the exact same outrage.
Well, I'm thinking mechanically, like what is actually happening, like this
Yeah.
stage of events to unfold for this.
So again, this comes back to why moral outrage is a red flag for absolutely everything. Like as soon as like you're talking about the totality of people with a flare of moral outrage, you're recuperated to begin with.
Yeah. Oh, it's this group's fault. No, it's that group's fault.
There aren't. It's not that there are no group that are not fault for anything, but the state of the world as a whole is not the fault of any one particular group.
Sure, that's true. Yeah.
I think that's the disconnect.
And also, there is no person existing anywhere in the world that is representative of any group. I mean, you can try to be represent, you can presume to represent something, but can you really? There's nobody themselves is
I
ever
mean,
the ideal.
if everything that's if the ego is so strong, then I think there's room for it to be there because
You're talking about identifying red flags like moral outrage as this is what the problem is. It's the type of group is important. It's a quality. Like we could say ego supporters are the worst type of people on the earth, right?
But then,
And then it becomes a little more functional.
But then, what does that statement mean?
They're the worst form of life.
No. But it's a conceited statement.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I am
above
better,
that.
right? So the very statement is itself already commodified. So that's
Ego
not a
supporters
thing,
are the scum of the earth.
right? Like you're bringing the example of exactly how the system would
Precuperate this.
even take
This is
this
how precuperation
explanation
works.
and try to do that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's very important to stay away from that because, as we can see, the only thing the ego can actually do between ego is compete. And here's why. We are describing it in terms of conceit, right? Conceit is describing the self-reference in terms of better, same, or worse. Well, if you reify that, what do you have?
Wait, what?
There's a line between each ego saying competition.
Yeah.
Competition
With
is
yourself.
driven by conceit.
Yeah.
Conceit is the comparison of the self-reference to better, worse, or same. So if ego is driven by conceit, which is the calculation of better, worse, or same, what does that
Wouldn't you
mean?
say
What does that mean for your relationship with any other expression of ego? Am I better, worse, or same?
Yeah.
Competition. It's by definition, it has to be a competition. There's no other relationship.
Right.
I'm not talking about competition between one ego and another, but between the expressions of ego, which would be what we call agency.
You mentioned self-reference, and I wondered if you should have used self as being,
No.
or
Self appears in the narrative and conceit appears before that.
I think you've said this before as well.
Yeah, if bring up the affect chart and I will show you.
Okay. I think it's kind of like a thread that we hadn't
Yeah, I know what you're
fixed
talking
up
about.
yet.
I know what you're talking about.
Well,
As well
let's,
as Telegram.
yeah, I guess,
It'll be close.
yeah, it should be.
I know. Well, because I posted it.
The affect chart, right?
Here's a useless mouse.
Yeah, I unplugged it to charge my phone. This one.
Sure.
Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo.
So,
Be back in a moment. Okay.
self appears in narrative. But to get to narrative, we have to go through conceit and transform pain, pleasure, and neutrality into aversion, attachment, and callousness. That's what gets fed into the narrative. You're not interested in the fact of the pain. You're interested in the fact that this is something you should avoid. You're not interested in the real pleasure. You're interested in the fact that you should be seeking that, or that this is the good thing, right? So by the time you get to self, the self is already contextualized as something that is aversive to something, or is attached to something, or is indifferent to something.
Yeah.
So that, and from that, the ego expression gets built. That this is better, that this is worse, that this is irrelevant.
Okay. Still not. I think I'm missing something here. Conceit. Um, so you could say like the self and the ego are something emerging in narrative later on.
Mm-hmm. In fact, ego is a version that takes the self to be a unit in a grander system that has
I get that.
no extrinsic features.
So conceit, though, can happen without ego.
Right.
You can start to develop stories and understandings of the world, or like,
That this is better, this is worse.
yeah, um, for me, better or
For me,
worse for me,
or for us, or for
right? Some sort of
identifier.
self-identifier. Okay, and so you can develop the entire thing can be developed. This is could be in the context of self entirely.
Yes,
Hatred,
but with
greed,
self you get ephemerality.
negligence,
With ego you get accounting.
right? With self, you have the potential for ephemerality because things can
No,
become
no,
grudges
no.
and
Yes,
held on forever.
sure, sure. Well,
It's possible.
there will be reiteration of the grudge, which is different and different and different and different. The differences with the accounting is that you have currency in place. So you're actually doing accounting. You're actually recording the exact wrongs, the exact rights,
Okay, and what you're actually getting here is a record into the environment, in media,
etched into it. Yeah.
a writing, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So that's
So the self cannot handle that by memory alone. It will evolve.
but yeah, it's a such a feeling like
Like without
fine distinction
ego is establishing it in writing, effectively.
because I'm imagining like having a vendetta in the self sense.
Do you remember that movie I keep alluding to?
Yeah.
It's like that. They have like this vendetta against each other, but the cycle ends with the actual activity between the two tribes, right? It's not like it's written into the world that it has to continue. It's more like, okay, this is going to be the ending event. Idealized. This is all idealized. I'm fully aware that this isn't
Hmm.
like noble savage territory
Yeah,
land, but
and again that's also I didn't like the word barter, but this is like feast economy level interaction
it would be the kind of stuff that the
potentially.
feast economy would pick up on and
Yeah, yeah.
repurpose.
This is even like an earlier echo. It feels like that things can build up to
Yeah,
such complexity, right? And then get turned over and through the
reutilized.
power washing through the wakes and all that.
Hmm. It's cool to like look at the
And
buildup of something
that's
seeing
a good that's a promising thing to see, um, echoes and echoes that just seem to line up with the
how we got here.
model. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So really, the model is saying there's one problem they're going to introduce to it that just like overtook. That's the uh, reducing everything to currency. When you reduce everything to numbers, you can use the number system to make do your logic for you, but the number system's logic isn't the same as yours.
Hmm. And
That's
it's
that's
interesting.
the washing. That's the brainwash. Not the brainwashing. The obfuscation. That's the meaning gets mangled because of this. It's a totally
Hmm.
different spectrum of thinking that is disconnected from the
Yeah,
layers that brought it to it.
because everyone around you is just reifying the downloads for the market machine. So what are you going to do?
Or they'll shoot you for not thinking like them.
Yeah, typically, yep, stuff like that. I'm sure many such cases in the past.
Well, here, no, that's not a problem. But yeah,
Thankfully, yes, we are.
at the moment, we do not suffer from that kind of extreme.
We do have the ability to hang out every couple weeks for a few hours and have some beers and enjoy some philosophy discussion.
So much, so much.
Philosoph.
If this was a philosophy, then
Yeah, I know philosophy is a trigger word. We
it's
haven't. We did appropriate it, and it's not good.
it isn't that I have an issue with it being philosophical to a degree, but thinking of it only is not useful to any degree. It's more like a response to inputs.
Philosophy as a mechanized system of thought, typically appropriated or approached that way.
Yeah, like
The academic, the scientismistic.
so in general, I don't use this as a philosophy, but more like a lens.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
it's interesting.
how to approach all of these contact points with life that I have available to me
Hmm.
without going
I
fucking
like
crazy.
my last essay that I did. It's called
That you
Global
did.
Emergence. I wrote every single word. Global Emergence, because it lays out a kind of foundation for understanding the system, like holonic models.
Hold on, my mom's calling
All right, les pods.
me. Alo, нормально, как у тебя?
And how funny?
Well, the last diagram was like pointing out how there's this pressure on from the market on conceit for moral outrage, right? To
Yeah.
have it going. And in the affect chart, you have this other side of the chart that just goes into
Right.
altruism and affect being a generic thing.
And moral outrage can be just your boss being upset with you for doing something and like
Yeah.
being physically angry.
Yeah.
I just connected that. I didn't think about that before. It usually seems like a political thing that some
That's
you
what you
go
usually
protest,
think about,
right?
yeah.
But no, it's ubiquitous.
Right. So this is actually what drives the entire idea behind guild dynamics. So if you'll notice
Moral outrage.
no, what this diagram is showing as a mechanism for pressure by market system to pressure the neural unit through pleasure and pain to induce conceit to provide commodities, right? If we think of ego as a piston,
Okay. How are you
then
connecting it to guild dynamics?
this
This
is
is
affect
market
chart,
machine.
because on the affect chart,
We want polymorphic machine.
right? So you have the altruism, affect.
Oh, we were on affect last. Right.
So the bottom left-hand side corner.
Meanplex?
No, the altruism being the opposition to, or not opposition, in relation to conceit.
That from where conceit emerged.
Well,
You could say.
altruism would be the lack of calculation of better, worse, and same.
Right.
So the pain that comes in is just pain.
We're
Pleasure just comes in.
we're having this whole facility and we're adding on conceit onto it.
Right.
Typical holostructure.
So you only get affect, pleasure, pain, and neutrality do not cause attachment callousness or aversion to anything, which results in detachment. There is no narrative additions to hatred, to neglections, to greed. It rained, or it's raining, versus it's raining and blah 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 blah.
This is what animals can't do. They can't decompose and deconstruct their whole aversion, callousness, attachment, structure.
Into a concrete narrative.
Whatever gets reified, they can't transmute that, and detach from it. It can become old and less relevant feeling to them, but it's not something they can work on to make their life a bit better by not being traumatized.
But they also cannot compose a coherent myth that says this is that, this is the other, this is the
the meta narrative,
right,
happening. Yeah. So humans have meta narrative.
In a nutshell.
Okay, glad we figured that out.
But do you see how much less is happening on the other side of conceit?
Yeah, of course.
So with altruism,
well, you could say actually there's hell of a lot more happening opposed to the side of conceit. Conceit is a tiny narrowing of potential into the circuit. But yes, I get your point.
So this is where it leads us into guild dynamics, because focus is the initial phase in which you move away from conceit into an altruistic disposition. So if you turn this around and you present hygiene, nutrition, rest, fitness as the overarching scheme of every reaction, right? conceit isn't playing a role.
Okay.
Because hygiene presents itself as a mechanical thing. You're either clean or not. Did you brush your teeth or didn't you? Did you clean your room or didn't you? Right? Like there's
This
no negotiation
feels
going on.
like focus would be one a narrative on top of this or like outside of this chart that points to how do you start having the lower end of the chart? How do you remove or are allowed to
Okay,
release the upper part?
past plateau. You're talking past plateau, whereas I'm kind of pretending that that other half doesn't even exist right now. Like focus
Yeah,
in
yeah,
its
yeah,
pure
yeah,
form,
yeah, yeah.
if you will.
Yeah, I'm
It
talking
doesn't
about
it, does,
diving back.
it doesn't come to those things until like the different processing about it.
Mhm.
I mean, sure, you can reintroduce conceit right back into the calculation by simply saying I am better than others for doing the focus thing,
Yep.
right? So this is what that last diagram that points to conceit as being the driving linchpin, with moral outrage being a fuel. Like, think of it as a piston, right?
Sure.
If you keep injecting the fuel, the piston keeps running,
Yeah.
extracting conceited narratives.
Mhm.
Focus stands in the way of that, breaking up the interaction, saying, okay, don't pump that, don't pump that part of the energy back into the system. Don't keep it there. Don't use it to roll yourself over. Shutting down the engine, basically, interfering with the intake.
Kind of reminded of like just breaking down first principles, like deconstructing, like criticism, being critical of, allowing that introspection, right? Inserting the moment of choice where you're allowed to say, what is this impulse? Because we just get impulses, right? The impulse is the whole package ready to move with the narrative, the reward, everything all sorted out. We're inserting a decision point.
Hold on a
Do I
second.
can I should I inspect this impulse or
Mhm.
just roll with it? And most of them should be rolled with. Some of them should be inspected.
And the skill is in figuring out which one is which.
Sure, I think we have an intuition pretty easily. And a lot of things are structures that we do, like traumas. They're there for a reason. They're protecting us, right? We're coping, if you will, but coping to avoid pain. So you got to know you can't just rip the band-aid off or this because there's pain that comes with it to process, right? And you wouldn't want to do that for somebody else either involuntarily because people can, you can, any of us, we can be put in through a whole trip by trying to deconstruct our
So
coping
no,
mechanisms.
I'm not. Look, I don't disagree with anything you said, but I don't know how to
Hmm.
convert it into what we just said. Like, yes, but I think what I'm getting at, me personally here, is that this is really, really intertwined. You made a good point in that focus is only applicable within the context of the runaway system to begin with. So it's like it's the artifact that you insert into the midst of the mythology that already is running.
Hmm. Like a grenade.
Exactly, yeah, basically. Well, hopefully not like a grenade.
It just sounded epic. But
Because the other thing is that
that's the danger of it, right? A lot can come
when
about the Dark Knight and everything.
if you let go of the narrative and you have nothing to come into, narratologically speaking, if you haven't practiced focus to begin with beforehand, there's
Right.
nothing to land it That would be like your Dark Knight of the Soul situation, which is not ideal.
And even in a let's say master participant relationship, um,
Which hasn't been qualified in this discussion
not yet,
whatsoever.
no, but
Before it has been before.
as we could see it in any scenario where you happen to have a knowledge or understanding, you feel like you could relay that to somebody. They the the ground has to be prepared first so that there's a landing, and then you can deconstruct. Don't go straight for the deconstruction because that's where shit just explodes, right? That's the grenade.
So yeah, and to quantify it, it's like if you shatter somebody's worldview without giving them anything to like land on, like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
so they're left now without any worldview. Whereas if you prepare a worldview beforehand and shatter the original,
Right?
the landing is not as
And this totally an area of charlatanism. Um, just in general, the idea of preparing a worldview and shattering the old, right? So,
yeah, yeah,
and we talk
but
extensively about that.
charlatanism can actually be identified by the fact that it's repeating the worldview it's shattering.
But how do you know that when
You don't.
in membership
No, you don't.
you're not a master yet, you're only a
No,
member.
I'm not saying that
You're a
you do.
blind
I'm
member.
just saying that this is like one of the things that sets it apart from what we're talking about.
Sure, yeah. To analyze the system, the model, the structure, how it works, how it's supposed to work. Not that it's
Yeah,
even
this
not that
isn't
it's even articulated.
this isn't a tip on how to do it. This is like something to be aware of and then figure out how to deal with it. Because I'm in the same, as far as that goes, I'm in the same boat as everyone else. I don't fucking know. Like, it's just different from person to person.
Yeah,
Holy
that's
shit.
the thing, yeah. Personal.
Yeah, and I'm not like monk level, step back individual.
But personal would make sense because we're talking about relationship between people, trust, building trust, rapport, like we've modeled this kind of
That
stuff.
does apply to the
What is
self.
this? What is the economy of information and of the culture and all this?
Remember, we also sell ourselves to ourselves, so it does apply in that context as well.
Sure, I don't know how that or what that means or what in what context.
So, like, if you imagine an ego stack, you can imagine it like one person versus another. If there you have two stacks, you can
Sure.
imagine two stacks that coexisting within one person's head, and they're at war with themselves.
Yeah.
That's all that means.
Well, yeah.
So
No,
that
first off, and I've said this before too, like the idea of an ego emergent is at war with the self. That's how we would place it. First off, that's the first war, the first commodity.
yes, the first species to be domesticated is the human, or the first archetype, I should say, in this case.
Yeah.
In fact, that's a feature of this archetype. It's a domesticated archetype. That would be the reason why machine, fiat, and the rest are archetypical rather than willy-nilly possible. So what I'm saying here is that not only does the human have that next level self-reflection capacity, I'm
Uh-huh.
saying that as it is subject to entropy and with a lack of the strength of the with the lack of the response of natural selection through delay, it goes haywire. And the archetypical human is already haywire
Hmm.
post plateau compared to the animal.
That's interesting. It almost makes me. It reminds me of
So you don't disagree.
immunity.
So you don't disagree that this is a valid distinction to take between animal and human. So it's not just human is animal in the market using currencies, using it's post plateau. I'm drawing on the same concepts as samsara's Buddhist samsara's division of like the realms. So the animal realm is all about like the natural instinct, whereas the
Mm,
human realm is about kingdoms and
time jail.
basically. So there's like that wedge between the two. Look,
Yes.
animals just never
I feel
do
like
that.
we haven't been super specific or able to nail down the difference between the archetypes, but I do feel like that's a distinction.
That's a valid one. That it's already like if you imagine the human being as a post-plateau animal, then its entire thinking realm is different.
Well, although this is a consequence of the abstraction ability, because we can both look at ourselves and experience our own animal world, but we can also at the same time be like, I am a
It's
commodity
the
on this market,
it's the perfect storm
dualistic, that
because you have
dualistic.
the ability is the potential, but the environment created a situation where that potential can be actualized over and over and over and over and over again.
Right? Yeah. So
So potential is half of it. Actualization and repetitive actualization.
humans have meta narratives,
Well, yeah, that
grand
again,
stories
that's
that unify all of the different
the meat. So those are
um,
those are meaning given
bits.
myths.
Like animals just collect bits of story through their life, and they learn in that way that certain deterrences or like an electric fence, it hurts you, stay away from it when you see it. Humans have the potential to stack another narrative on top of that, which is an overall overview, archetypical type of scenario thing to double interpret both what they just experienced locally in a context of
That
something
fence
greater.
example is actually a great way to segue, because if you look at it from the dog's perspective, it's like this part of the world hurts me.
Yeah,
From the perspective of the human, is like I'm sectioning off a part of the world to hurt dogs or whatever critter.
sure, yeah, or cows.
So there's like a futuristic sort of mentality going on, whereas this whole area is designated
Right. So
to have.
it's like the animal isn't isn't going to be scheming, I guess, to get revenge or do something in the future, like a
Against the fence.
complicated. Yeah. Well, yeah. Um, it wouldn't necessarily think that the human is what did the fence, what caused the pain in the moment. Even with plenty of obfuscation, I guess. Oh yeah.
So yeah, we've nailed down not only the intricacies of ego stacking, ego interworkings between ego
Hmm.
stacking, ego interworkings between egos within an ego stack.
Intra ego.
We are also discuss the attachment it has to the reward punishment system that appears on every layer of the ego stack. So if you were to look at the ego
Yep.
stack and then you have the system on the side dishing out rewards and punishment, the last diagram we looked at that has it all from the top down, right,
Pardon.
is explaining how each ego is treated by the system and how those rewards and punishments are dished out. So when we split it into four different stacks, you can kind of like look at it as like this is one layer, the next layer, the next layer, the next layer of the Tower of Babel stack going down.
Mhm.
So when you see those competition lines, And those competition lines then have take a different turn in a fire diagram, where you see them resulting in reforms and revolutions.
Yep, that's been quite an arc.
Excuse me.
I'm glad for it. I like the discussion on power and the kind of origins of power through this ego structuring. This is even pre-currency, pre-market, pre-capital is happening. This
Well, every
hierarchy of power, the debt, the idea of debt, basically, the myth of usury, you could say. Um,
Okay, so you were saying that, and a thought occurred to me that I think I should just blurt out.
Fine.
The market as an entity is completely bereft of any creative force. It's literally just a parasite. I forgot where I was going with this.
Mhm.
It felt like
To mechanistic ends, to its own ends, it can't have any beauty of its own making because its own its meta narrative is simply
fall in line,
itself only.
fall in line,
Fall in line.
do your job.
Oh, fall in line. I
In
thought you
line.
said a fall in line, but it's also a fall in line. Fall in line to this fall in line. Yep. How you doing? All right. That's
You know,
hitting pretty good there.
I'm trying to like remember what I was saying.
Well,
In
we just kind of were recapping, I guess, of how like pretty awesome all the charts we went through. Ego, we set all that up. We had a discussion of power going all the way through it, and into politics eventually. So we got an amazing arc here. I like to call it time jail, like just as kind of a fun thing. And time jail reconfigures space prison because space prison existed. It's kind of like a pseudo form, but then time jail comes in and totally shapes the environment again. But also the mental environment, this human realm.
if the prison of reality, if reality is the prison, then jail is the market. The prison system
Yeah,
is like you're
that's the
always
general wave.
you're subjected to, but the jail system is incidental. But the incidental systems got warped the fuck. By prison system of the system, I mean like nature. You can't like not breathe. You're confined.
Right.
You have those kinds of
Yes.
confines.
And we have to establish that, and then establish that um, the feast economy established
Jail is like you
with
can't breathe this.
obligation.
You have to breathe air of this quality, not that quality.
I don't know, but we have to start establishing from the bottom. So, space prison, feast economy,
Space prison. Okay, I don't know what space prison is yet.
obligation, debt, feast economy, obligation, debt. Um, the
Stepping
the
stones, yes.
deterrences that are available to this system
Okay,
are
obligation should.
not high level. They're like spears, they're cuffs,
Okay, hold
they're
on, hold on, hold on.
chains, right? They're fences.
I like the way you're phrasing it. Obligation, then debt. Obligation fits with feast. Debt fits
Um,
with market.
no, wait, I didn't say that. I
You said
believe
those words.
obligation is a debt. I tried
Mm.
just
No,
elaborating.
it's a pseudo debt. What I'm saying, this is what I'm saying. It's a pseudo debt. So when you have an obligation, it's like having a debt before there's currency.
I I I am 100% on board with the idea of debt coming in with the obligation myth with feast economy.
Okay, but
Like full on debt. Like
I just had another thought.
I owe you this beer alcohol because you worked my field, right? We wrote it down. That's a debt. Now the debt is being paid.
So I think obligation might be more like the gift economies.
I equated debt and
Pre-
obligation.
Low-hanging fruit for recuperation. So like in a gift economy,
Okay.
obligation makes more
Yeah, okay.
sense. But it's like a low-hanging fruit to recuperate. It's like to utilize
You're
the
talking
sense
about
of it
that within a gift economy,
to utilize
there
it for debt.
still would be expectation, if you will,
Yeah,
which
like I
is the
mean,
same as saying obligation in a way for social things to happen, right?
obviously, like if you're getting all of this help from
So
your
it's sort of
tribe,
systemic.
don't you just feel?
It's systemic. The tribe is doing something and they need someone to
Yeah,
do
but the
this part.
nature system. When we talk about the nature systems, right? It always expands into some kind of animism,
Yeah.
right? Like so, that's the lens of that system. It's like a polymorphic, recontextualized stacking. I know I'm being a nerd right now, but bear with me. Like all of this nuance.
Yeah, I don't know. I got lost, but let's just take a break, I guess, and
So I'm
get it
saying
back up. We got about half an hour left.
so I'm saying like the sense of obligation that you would gain in that kind of environment isn't coming from the environment telling you you're obligated to do so. You've received this help, you've received that help, you've received that help, you're capable of producing the same kind of help, you see what it does,
Okay.
you are inclined to just perform.
Uh, so this is like gift economy, social programming,
It is systemic,
animistic social programming.
right?
Yeah, I
But the
get that.
system comes from the animus.
And it's not like anybody told you now you have to. You process this in your mind as like
This is what you do.
this seems like the next thing to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so that was the distinction I was trying to
Okay,
get.
if we call that obligation and the gift, then it would have to be the myth of usury for debt.
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 No, it's just debt. Obligation, debt.
Yeah, but talking mythically, as in things we believe in. We believe in.
But remember that if you have if what you have to return is a commodity, then that commodity is simply monetary value on a ledger. It costs this many units of currency.
No.
Okay.
Um, feast economy, hierarchies, owing somebody something. You don't need
Okay, so
money.
no, that's I'm not talking about feasts
You have
specifically.
to. I am. If we're gonna morph the terms, I have to start from where we are at, and then talk about modifying things.
So we started off with um,
Feast economy
we started off with
has
gift.
obligation.
We started off with gift economy.
Sure, but I don't want to develop the gift economy right now. I'm not interested in that.
Give me a second. I do remind me what we were talking
Okay,
about.
let's take a break.
have
Okay, we're back.
we either have two different terms, one of
I
which
also
is
have a solution.
obligation and another one is something else, or we have two types of obligation, one that pertains to
Yep,
the gift
it's
economy
both.
and one that pertains to barter
It's both
in the
actually
feast.
because of holo stacking, as per usual. So you're right to latch on that um, distinction that obligation should be something earlier. And I like that if we see obligation in the gift economy, it means that we are having a society where people are constantly getting off track a little bit. And we need medicine, right, for this kind of stuff. Because people are feeling guilty. You're having guilt already, potentially, right? This is what medicine is needed for.
Oh,
So
well, it's also been known that helping actually induces feelings, like emotional feelings, and chemistry is kind of been on board with this,
pardon,
where helping somebody like
feels good.
feels good, yeah.
That's fine. That's
Like
fine.
it produces
But what
dopamine.
the reason I would almost replace the reciprocity myth with the obligation myth
So
because
reciprocity actually fits with market.
we're trying to identify maybe no, it wasn't supposed to, but
Okay.
we're
I,
trying. Reciprocity was just the bare idea that if you take from nature and give back to it, like there's some kind of voodoo happening where everything just works, and it's based in abundance that you don't need anything more complicated. Um,
okay, so when I hear the word reciprocal,
Transactional
there's
sounding,
already
yeah,
kind of an
exactly. See,
agreement.
so it was wrong. You might be right. Maybe we could even use reciprocal because it sounds market-esque.
Yeah,
It sounds capital.
I'm only like stumped on the idea of if you're reciprocating, then how do you like if you do it without like prior agreement,
There was no other word
how do you understand that to be reciprocal?
because you give and take from nature.
Yeah,
That was the point. This wasn't meant to be a deconstruction or anything.
but how
This was
is
a horrible word because there was no other good word to point to what is your myth right now? How are you economizing? What's your economic myth? That was it. How are you
so
making things
I'm not
happen?
picking on you. Please don't feel that way.
I'm trying to
Well,
help you understand where I was coming from
yeah,
so you critique the right thing.
yeah, cool. I'm not trying to critique your critique of me. I'm trying to like put together
Thank you.
piece, put together the correct words for the right phenomena. So it sounds to me like obligation would be that intrinsic feeling, if you will, as to like, well, so remember that conversation we had about building up of power,
Obligation
and
is the
and
simplest word.
I
I
think
already I already agree with it.
yeah,
That it should
I'm not
be in
arguing.
animistic.
I'm not even trying to like over argue or anything.
I would
I'm
like
just
obligation, usury, and currency, something like that, as far as myths that support the economies.
so I'm
Um,
just preaching to the choir essentially.
yeah.
Okay, I'm just trying to push the details.
I don't like reciprocity as a market thing, though, like, because it sounds too holistic or wholesome. It doesn't make any sense. What do you mean reciprocity?
Well, I mean,
We're enemies. I'm transacting because you're going to give me that. It's not reciprocal. People understand reciprocal as a holistic thing or wholesome. This isn't reciprocity. This is transaction, right? I don't want to use reciprocity. It's such a weak word for market.
but I think reciprocity is covered within transaction. I think is what I would say.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Transaction is a much better word to describe what's happening. It's a machine-like.
Reciprocity would be
Um,
reciprocity would be like a
mm,
model's way of using transactions. Here, I'll bring it back. If you were to use the model's way of doing transactions in a specific way,
So you're speaking
you can
model to
you can
yourself.
set up it to be reciprocal. And if you think about it, trade guild, my one favorite subject, is perhaps the thing that's concerned with that.
Right.
Right? So if you look at reciprocity as taking the holistic step back the way you want for that term to be, this is how you can shape it. So you take the transactional nature of the system to fabricate the membrane of the guild and transform supply and demand into demand and supply.
Oh, damn.
What? You didn't want feedback?
No, I like it. Obligation. Yeah, because obviously things happen in a more like wasn't obligated things in a gift economy. Obligation is the systemic thing that's threatening to go viral with in bigger times, right? That idea that you feel a guilt to do something in a way. If you don't do it, you feel guilty. That's what
When
it
I
is.
think about obligation, I don't think about what other parties are thinking of. So when you personally feel obligated, it's not like the others are expecting the same to match. So
That's an
what
illusion that other people are expecting it. Is
yeah,
you're pointing at?
like with obligation, it's like what you want
Yeah,
to do
yeah, okay.
for other people
So
without them expecting it.
we're defining the term. We're scooping it out.
And then with reciprocity, it's like introducing obligation the way it used to be, like that route of obligation, into the modern setup. So not like I'm obliged to, like, you gave me $5, I have to give you $5, but more like you gave me $5, I feed you. I feel the obligation
I'm not
to.
sure where you went with that. I don't know what you're talking about
So
overall.
we were talking about how reciprocity is like the model's version of using transactions to
Okay.
to reintroduce.
So that's a dimension
It's a new
that
idea.
we didn't.
It's a new idea.
Mhm. And this is,
It's
as you
evolving
said,
from
this
what
is
you're saying.
uh, trade guild dynamics, if you will.
Yeah. So
Cool.
what we end up seeing is that we are reintroducing through reciprocity the same dynamic as we had with obligation. You're not in it for, tit for tat. You just you supply what's demanded, and the obligation is like the obligation to supply.
Right. And you're talking about, again, what I was doing before, medicine from top down, post plateau, and all this. How do you come back and approach it?
Right. And the other element that we've seen is that we need to bypass conceit, because conceit is literally part of the framework that the system is using, with moral outrage being the fuel, just mythologically speaking, which is fed through rewards and punishment.
Right. So we've got this whole machine, breakaway machine. It just takes off, and nobody can put a rope on it since.
Well, I mean, that's the grim view.
Well, that's the pseudo history of it. There was, the axial age religions tried to address it.
Okay, so
How did that go?
they got recuperated into explaining that this is the way it should go. Ta-da!
Circle of life. Yep, yep.
So we have obligation and we have reciprocity. What should be coming in between during the good old age of feast economy, which sits right between the two?
You're imagining a healthy thing to do within feast economic terms?
No, all right, back up. Obligation, feast economy, X. We don't have a name for it yet. System, market. We have debt, we have reciprocity.
I think debt happens before market.
We need currency. We're still at pseudo. So
It's
it
like a
has to be
pseudo
it
debt.
has to be a holdover. There's something else here.
Think so?
We can't have debt without currency. We don't have currency.
Okay.
That's why. So it's a type of an obligation and it's a type of debt. Something between the two.
Um,
Usury? What is usury?
well, that's debt, though.
Let's see if it talks about currency as a
The
definition.
only word came to mind so far is like um, responsibility.
Hmm. Do not like it.
It's kind of related, though. Expectation.
Hmm. So we have obligation, we have debt. Expectation seems flimsy.
Well, obligation is already pretty powerful.
It's supposed to be because that's a very powerful feeling.
Hmm. Right, and yet it seems like one of the most basic things, like an
Mm-hmm.
obligation. Okay.
So there's a term in here that we don't know of yet. I'm willing to pretend that we created it and then
It's basically pseudo debt.
sure.
Um,
It's it's
Thinking
it,
about
it's ex, it's
contracts.
basically the exploitation of obligation that looks like a form of debt. You know what I mean? Like if you had money to deal with this stuff, that would it would
Yeah.
you would call it a debt. But what you're dealing with is like more like mythological obligation.
Duty.
Hmm.
There it is.
Hmm. And then it pervades everything. Obligation,
Feels clean off the
duty,
bat.
debt. Duty without debt seems much more palatable. Yeah. Seems to line up with
You
experience.
still have hierarchy.
Retain hierarchy. Yeah. Lines up with experience.
What experience?
Your feeling of obligation being hijacked into duty.
Hmm. Like you're just saying, like naturally it does flow.
Yeah.
With what our world has experienced.
Yeah.
Cool.
Duty. That's the word.
Duty free. To the duty free world. That's all we want. To a duty free world.
Just debt and obligation.
Success. Yeah, only that. Only that.
And obligation. Because I'm saying this because you don't escape the animistic perspective. It's still all built inside of it.
This is the whole structure. It has to be building. It has to be in this context. It's a more superior and potent modeling.
Oh, superior
strategy.
Look at that ego going, based on conceit.
It's definitely above.
Above, yes.
Linear models. How do you like that?
The conceit.
Just feel that one, eh? That's the second good joke on that tonight. Today.
It's a really interesting interplay, though, if you think about like consequences and like how chaotic the loopings become. It really like just paints the picture as to why this is a tall order and why entropy is such a huge player in everything of this. Like, yeah, obviously you can come to a conclusion in a single moment.
How do you connect entropy to everything? Like, what's your mind thought path to, oh, entropy, it's just entropy here, it's entropy here. Like, we're talking social systems, economies.
In a general
feast economy.
In a general cycle of everything we're talking about, you construct the moment, which constructs your dream, right? So you have that narrative, dream, soundbite, construction. But then it gets fed back through the system.
The dream pops up to you, right? You could say that this is part of the impulse.
Sure. But the point is that like you can have like the most constructive moment ever, where everything fits together, and everything is part of the thing, right? But the next moment comes, everything is rearranged, ever so slightly, and so you extrapolate from this, from what you just said and what I'm just saying. The number of moments that can remain coherent are less likely to happen than the number of moments that are going to stay incoherent.
Okay.
As simple as that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you always have to feed it back. You always have to
like archetypically,
feed energy
on
into
every level and every facet of any system that we can conceptualize, there's this dynamic where it's probably most likely wrong, and as time goes on, it's even more wrong. So that's kind of like the quicksand of which the tower is built on. Quicksand.
So the more stable it is, the worse it's off.
Mm-hmm.
The more it's susceptible to renewal, the better it'll fare, so to speak. Ideally. Right. Again, introduce entropy into that.
And by more stable, renewal. By more stable, you meant more rigid.
Yeah.
Stability can be metastability.
Yeah. So, like, I introduced this notion into everything I think of.
Tensegrity.
Regardless of the clarity of my diagrams, right? There's always a new person that will read this diagram and like totally get the completely wrong information, and will start a conversation about that wrong information entirely. hypothetically speaking, I'm giving myself the credit for
Then he should
anybody
be reading.
actually,
He should be looking at my diagrams. That's what's the problem is. Mine are
or
better.
my explanations of it. But that's actually true in the sense that you have to reintroduce an artificial force into that process to restabilize it over and over and over and over again to just maintain.
Yeah, that's got to be part of it to punch out new shapes.
Or exterminate.
Yeah, it's certain departments, certain areas, fields of
Well,
expertise are sensing the environment itself.
have you ever like read up about the immune system, like how it functions?
Yeah, it's neat. Corporate should and is often modeled over these kind of things. Like for one viable system model, like cybernetics, the ability to adjust and update your models as a business, as a company. Like this is all
I
getting
was actually referring
recuperated,
to something very,
recuperated as
very
well.
interesting about the immune system. That's not that. Yeah, what your immune system will. This is my best understanding. So
Because it's
bear,
correcting.
bear with,
It's a
bear with
corrective
me.
force in the company.
The immune system will literally take constant mutations of you, of your cells, and try to figure out how to deal with it. So, like when you feel like you're normal and stable, not sick with anything, your immune system at that point in time will literally trigger mutations randomly inside you. And
Well,
then
don't those mutations automatically already happen? Like we always,
they
there's all
do,
kinds of
they
things
do,
going up that it has to deal with.
they do, but they use that mechanism to induce that. Like that's the crazy part
Sounds
about it.
cancerific.
Exactly. It's actually like very much in line with
Although I think,
what you won't do.
oddly, healthy
Because
immune systems somehow know how to identify cancer. Like immune system regularly
my
destroys
point
cancer.
my point is that it's like literally releasing uh, versions of yourselves into itself so that it can deal with any possible repercussions.
Who knows? I think
It's a
there's an
pretty fucking
endless.
insane process.
Um,
Like it's again, it's to the best of my
the
ability to
immune
explain
system
it.
as like a front, like it's looking at it holonically, present in every single facet of the body. So let's say something weird happens over here or over here, right? Even subtly, yes, the whole system can
So
react to those points
so
of those incursion
so
points.
some of those reasons is because it actually played out the scenario out for
That
itself.
seems weird. I find it hard to believe.
It no no it I was fucking amazed by reading this. So like I'm telling you like this excitedly in a way. Like
Be
it will
interesting. Send me
literally
the paper.
it would
I'll have
it's
my
not a paper. It's
I'll
not a
have my
paper.
chat.
It's like all over. Like it's a known thing. There, it's not even a paper at this point. It's like this is what people use to know how to medicate people.
We'll
So
get Chat
we're
GPT to summarize it.
for sure. But it's a really cool facet of it.
Interesting, yeah.
In a lot of ways, your own immune system has probably digested the fuck up that will come in.
Well, immunity is right after education. So, as far as a neurochemical operating system or network is concerned, learning is number one, but then immunity is the first thing we do
To protect from the learning.
to protect the learning from getting corrupted, right?
And it's doing this actively. It's trying to corrupt and figure out how to deal with the corruption. Okay. The body does this on a chemical level.
Right. Like imagine learning your lessons after so much time, right? And these kind of things that we all do. I'm looking at myself here. Um, but
Well,
yeah,
how does like
there's the Grandmaster is ever present. That's a Portal Mountain way of saying.
think of it this way? if you get a cut on you, why doesn't it get infected every time that you cut yourself? How does your body already know, for example,
Because they're
how to deal,
guaranteed there's all kinds of things get whenever the skin is cut.
and it's trying them out
There's
constantly?
all kinds of stuff is just there that can start multiplying. All you need is one sometimes, right? For a
Yeah.
thing, for a bacteria to start
So what
multiplying.
I'm saying is that you don't get infected every time because almost
The threats
like
are all getting neutralized.
preemptively, your body literally
Remembers from the last time it did
tried
that.
out that combination and saw bacteria.
Maybe I get what you're on.
It's throwing everything at the wall.
Hmm.
Everything. It allows for
This
every
to me kind
possible
of feels
mutation.
like
It's so bizarre,
what
but
do they
it's
call
so
it?
cool.
Um, Epigenetics. This is a epigenetical process. It feels like because it's like taking its programming and then on top of that changing the situation after the body's already created through DNA, right?
Hmm.
Then you're
Yeah,
you're
that
just
matches.
um,
Yeah, so the immune system is like the natural way of doing that. Throw everything
to
at the
be
wall and see
studied.
what works.
Yeah.
It is a laboratory.
And so the immune system has its own reflection in um, like antibodies that are remembering. Like there's anytime you
Oh yeah,
encounter any type of disease or
yeah, and then
anything,
there's the
you get
externals.
these antibodies that are like, I'm on patrol for that. And they're just there. This is your memory.
And the
This
first
is the memory existing in your body.
and so it uses the
In other
first
words,
mechanism.
education. So this is your education system
So check
for,
this,
for your physical immune
and
system,
yeah,
is that you get antibodies sitting there ready to go.
but check this out. The way it gets to it is by whenever it's introduced to a new um, element like that, like a new virus, a new bacteria, or whatnot. It takes the first system where it just throws all shit at the wall and
Yeah,
derives all of the different ways it dealt with stuff to try new combinations to like fuck over whatever the hell is invading.
that's
So
cool.
so
And I
so
feel like we're
so
getting
it's
off
like
track,
communicating way
though.
back. Oh, we're totally
In
off
light of the
track.
fact that we
We are
have,
totally off track, but the immune
uh,
system is like
let's
so
say,
fucking cool
almost
in
five
that
ten
it's
minutes.
both authoritative and completely holonic in its own. Like it will destroy your own body if it feels like it's the invader, autoimmune system diseases, right?
Yeah,
I lost my hair to one of those, but at the same time, it's like primed for anything you throw at me. I will
pardon.
egalitarianism, fundamentalism. There's a fundamental constraint. The body has to be maintained. Egalitarianism. Throw shit at a wall, see how to solve those problems for this body that you are constrained to.
We've talked about this
Nature is working the
stacking,
same way.
colonic stacking, in which at every point you find a constraint which constricts the field into a certain language, which is spoken at a higher layer.
But the
And
language is
within
expanding.
that layer, at the higher layer, is all the permutations utilizing that language that can possibly be spoken.
Right. All the words of that
Potentially
language,
could
all
be
the
there.
sentences of that
And you'll
language.
find only a very small subset will ever conglomerate to create yet another layer to solidify, whether it's through time. But yeah, we're pretty much, that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Boot it.
Well,
Well, with that, we're gonna call it.
Oh,
And
I didn't mean that.
yep, no, we gotta peace out.
You were
So
saying?
whatever we were saying, we doubled down, and that's about it. So enjoy. Thanks for everybody being there. We love you all, and you all the best. And climb Portal Mountain. It's good for your health and stuff.